Welcome back to another FPL video ahead of Game Week 27. This will be the team selection where I dissect my Game Week 26 performance and look ahead to my transfer plans for Game Week 27 and cover all the latest updates, including the Tuesday results from the FA Cup and how that impacts Blank Gameweek 29. Man City's 6-2 win over Luton Town means Brighton versus Man City will not take place. Both teams will blank in 29. And the other result is Newcastle beating Blackburn on penalties, which means that Crystal Palace versus Newcastle will also not take place definitively in Blank Gameweek 29. I'll also discuss the impacts on my transfer plans as a result. And there are still some Wednesday games to go, and that's why there could be an updated version of the team selection. And if you want to see a chip strategy guide, be sure to drop a like and get this video to over 200. And then I'm going to talk about all of my plans for the chip strategy and talk about some alternative chip strategies for you so that you can optimize your team until the end of the season. But I'll talk about when I'm going to look to use the bench boost, the free hit and the wild card. And that free hit in particular is heavily dependent on the remaining FA Cup results on the Wednesday. So without further ado, let's jump straight into this video and talk about my Blank Gameweek 26 performance. It has been a while since I got a return from a goalkeeper, but Areola got 2 points, whilst my backup goalkeeper Dubravka got 0, as he missed out entirely against Arsenal due to illness, but he was able to feature against Blackburn in the FA Cup 5th round, and he was arguably the man of the match. He made a save in the penalty shootout, and he also made multiple saves throughout the game. So ultimately with Areola and Dubravka, they do rotate quite well in terms of fixtures. They're both very cheap, but the returns are very minimal, and even when you look at other goalkeepers, there's not one particular standout, and every single one has their pros and cons. I think David Raya is arguably the best in terms of a defensive perspective and clean sheet chances, but he's likely to not feature in 29 depending on if Leeds beat Chelsea or not. Then maybe Arsenal can feature. And also in Game Week 28, Raya won't be able to play against his parent club Brentford. So really it's a great option for Game Week 27, and he'll be almost non-existent for Game Week 28 and 29 depending on the FA Cup results. Then afterwards, Game Week 30, it's Man City. From 31 until the end of the season, you could argue Raya is the best option. Alisson, once he comes back, would be a terrific choice, but ultimately I don't think there's a particular standout in goal. So I'm going to stick with Areola and Dubravka for the time being. My defensive line was once again woeful, and Estupiñán sums it up to a T. He did really well upon his comeback. 3 returns in 3 games, but ever since he's been sobbed off early against Luton Town and had multiple bench appearances, getting those 1-pointers, and ultimately that isn't good enough. Brighton aren't even that solid defensively in general, but Estupiñán has that attacking potential when he starts games, even though you have to say since his comeback he has mainly been playing as a left centre-back and his attacking threat is minimal. When you look at the underlying numbers, there was a huge overperformance which I discussed at the time, but I still thought he was capable of getting those assists and the occasional goal. But now that he's not even starting games, Estupiñán is a very easy sell. Despite the next 2 fixtures looking great, he could get a start in one of those 2, but the minutes is just far too big of a risk, and ultimately Estupiñán is one to discard very easily. My second defender was Nathan Ake, the only one to get a return amongst my backline with a clean sheet against his former club Bournemouth, and he did start in the FA Cup against Luton Town, but most people would expect him to start against Manchester United in the derby over the weekend, and if that's the case, I'd be quite happy to start him. I think Man United are in a terrible place right now with Højlund being injured, and they really struggle to score goals when one of Højlund, Garnacho or Rashford misses out. When those 3 are together, they actually do quite well with 6 wins and 1 draw, 0 losses, and averaging 2.7 goals per game, but they are no longer going to be there together, and as a result, Man City are the heavy favourites to win this game quite comfortably, and I think a clean sheet is certainly possible. But my final defender is Saliba, and Arsenal conceded an expected goals conceded figure of 0.18. Yet they managed to not get that clean sheet. Willock scored a great header after he came on, and Arsenal have been very frustrating from that perspective. They should be keeping more clean sheets, and whilst their recent run is incredible both in terms of scoring goals and defensively, they still should keep more clean sheets in general, and it's very surprising. The underlying numbers, there's still a huge underperformance there, and that's why those with double Arsenal defence have been very unfortunate this season. Let's now move on to the midfielders, where there were more returns. Things are a bit more interesting, but my transfers in Game Week 26 didn't pay off, and ultimately it led to a huge swing, and it was the difference between a green and a red arrow. I got too wrapped up by the fixtures, particularly Game Week 26 against Sheffield United, and I went for Hwang Hee-chan. The main alternative for me was Douglas Luiz, and that was because of Blank Gameweek 29 more than anything else. But if you are looking to buy Douglas Luiz right now, He is still a good option, of course, but 2 of the next 3 games are away from home, including that fixture in Blank Gameweek 29 against West Ham. And Douglas Luiz is awful in away matches. He's only returned in 2 matches on his travels. But at Villa Park, he's a different beast entirely. He's averaging almost 10 points per game in home matches. But with Hwang Hee-chan, he could remain a useful option because aside from the good fixtures like Newcastle away, Fulham at home, and potentially Bournemouth at home in Gameweek 29, he actually could feature in Blank Gameweek 29 because Bournemouth lost to Leicester in extra time yesterday, and now the only result we need on the Wednesday is for Wolves to lose to Brighton, and that is possible, but Brighton do have a lot of injuries. Matoma, for example, is ruled out for the rest of the season, and that's why Bailey and Douglas Luiz would still be just set and forget safe options for Gameweek 29, and I would rather go for Bailey at this moment in time. If you're looking to buy an Aston Villa midfielder, check out my best wildcard team video to find out why. But my second midfielder also blanked, and that was Anthony Gordon. I sold Gross to Gordon a couple of weeks ago, and it has been a disastrous transfer to say the least. Gordon hasn't been that bad. He got that return in the last game against Bournemouth in double Gameweek 25, scoring that penalty, but Pascal Gross has been a bonus points machine, returning in every single match and getting maximum bonus points in the process. So that has been a disastrous transfer, and that was the key difference for me in the midfield. Whilst I had 2 high-scoring midfielders who got double-digit hauls, the other 2 in Hwang Hee-chan and Anthony Gordon blanked, whilst you've got Pascal Gross, Douglas Luiz, Leon Bailey, even Pablo Sarabia, and a few other midfielders doing the business. Jarrod Bowen scoring a hat-trick against Brentford on Monday night. So it was the worst-case scenario in terms of my picks for the budget midfielders. On a more positive note, things look much better with my next 2 midfielders, Phil Foden getting 11 points against Bournemouth, scoring that winner and getting maximum bonus points. And Man City did hold on until the end. Bournemouth had some chances to equalise, and maybe a draw would have been the fair result. But Man City are in machine mode. In the Premier League, they're mainly just grinding out results and doing just about enough to secure those results. But in the FA Cup, they let loose, Kevin De Bruyne getting 4 assists and Erling Haaland scoring 5 goals in that 6-2 victory, whilst Phil Foden was on the bench, and that is also very promising for the weekend against Manchester United, where Foden scored a hat-trick in this fixture. The same goes for Erling Haaland in that 6-3 victory. So it could be another huge result there, and Man United are definitely there to be targeted with no Luke Shaw, Lisandro Martinez and Rasmus Højlund. And the final midfielder is the most informed player in the Premier League, Bukayo Saka, with another double-digit haul against Newcastle, a 10-pointer. And what more can you say about Saka? He's got 7 goals in this calendar year, more than anybody else, and he has been absolutely incredible. It's Sheffield United away next, and I put a captaincy poll out, and Saka was leading over Erling Haaland, although that may change with Erling Haaland scoring those 5 goals against Luton Town. And you know how form is in football, and also how football can be in general, very fickle, and things change very quickly, to say the least. But let's now complete the performance review with the 3 forwards, and my other transfer for a -4 hit was extremely disappointing. I learnt my lesson a long time ago. Keep Ollie Watkins at all costs. Aston Villa will not have any doubles for the season, but they will also not have any blanks, and that's the most important thing about Watkins. He's steady, consistent. He featured in Gameweek 26, got that early goal and a 9-pointer. He was actually in for the bonus points. At one point he had 2, then he dropped down to 1, and then completely out of the bonus points as John McGinn usurped him. But Watkins still got those 9 points courtesy of the goal and assist against Nottingham Forest, and he's just so consistent, fixture proof. The only time you could argue he's a sell is maybe from Gameweek 32 onwards, when Aston Villa's fixtures turn for the worst, and you've got the likes of Tony with great fixtures and Erling Haaland. But even then, I would recommend Ollie Watkins to be held throughout the entire season, as he can do well against absolutely anybody. The same goes for the next striker, Erling Haaland, but he did only get an assist against Bournemouth, and he missed 3 big chances, and that's a recurring theme in the Premier League. He missed 3 big chances against Chelsea, against Brentford. It took a late goal in the end to get an 8-pointer and salvage 10 points overall in double Gameweek 25. But I think those that triple captain Haaland in Gameweek 25 will be very frustrated with him, and especially those who also have Kevin De Bruyne due to their performances in the FA Cup against Luton Town, which was absolutely sensational. And that's what they can do, and that's why so many people triple captain Erling Haaland not so long ago. My final player was Ivan Toney, who I bought in as part of a -4 hit. I sold Darwin Núñez, and ultimately that decision to sell Solanke in double Gameweek 25 has massively backfired. I lost 7 points there due to Darwin Núñez getting only 5 points, being injured in the first half, while Solanke got 12. Also take into account the -4 hit, that's 11 points lost out on, and another -4 hit to bring Ivan Toney in. I was trying to be aggressive and target the fixtures. Toney has a great record against West Ham, but he was absolutely ineffective against the Hammers. even though Brentford scored twice, Tony wasn't involved at all, and he constantly dropped deep, and he was nowhere near looking like he was going to score a goal or get an assist on that night. So that was extremely disappointing, to say the least. I was convinced that Tony would do well, but he can do against Chelsea, even Arsenal away in Game Week 28. And in Game Week 29, I would argue that there are 3 players who are essential at this moment in time: Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney, and Heung-min Son. My captaincy pick for Blank Gameweek 26 was a very average one. Erling Haaland only was able to get an assist, 5 points, he missed 3 big chances, and ultimately Saka and Watkins, who I ranked 2nd and 3rd as the best captains for Blank Gameweek 26, were the ones to go for in the end. I got 58 points with a -4 hit taken into account. That's 54, and I'm also getting closer to 1,600 overall points, and my rank is 359,000. So it was a very small red arrow, only by 4,000 places, and ultimately going for Hwang Hee-chan over the likes of Douglas Luiz, Leon Bailey, and Jarrod Bowen was a game-changing decision in Game Week 26. But Douglas Luiz was the main alternative, and like I said, it was mainly with an eye to Blank Game Week 29, which is going to factor in when I discuss my transfer plans for Game Week 27. So let's now talk about the starting 11 and the captaincy for the upcoming deadline. I do have a benching dilemma between my goalkeepers in Game Week 27, and that's mainly because I have no faith in either option. So it's just about who's going to get a 3-pointer for me, who's going to get maybe 2 points or less. And right now I'm going for Areola away to Everton, who have been misfiring recently. But when you look at the worst defences in this calendar year, West Ham and Newcastle are the 2 worst, with Newcastle being dead last right now. And you have to say, Areola and Dubravka have been quite good in general, especially Areola over the course of the season, a contender for the best goalkeeper. But ultimately the defences are letting them down, and Dubravka sometimes has his shaky moments like he did against Bournemouth, which gave Solanke that tap-in. But he was man of the match against Blackburn in the FA Cup, making multiple saves, and he was the hero for them in that competition. So maybe Dubravka, with that home fixture, is the one to start. But as things stand, I'm going for Areola. Sometimes the best thing to do is to wait for more injury updates, and Ange Postecoglou said almost 2 weeks ago that Pedro Porro will be out for a couple of weeks. There is a chance he features in Game Week 27 against Crystal Palace. If he's ready to start, I'm very happy to start him in this game week, despite Oliver Glasner making an immediate impact with that 3-0 win over Burnley. Of course, the Clarets did go down to 10 men, and that played a big part, but Crystal Palace played some good football, and I'm looking at this London derby, and I think there's going to be plenty of goals on both sides with 2 very attack-minded managers, and Pedro Porro is really there for the attacking potential, and I'm not a huge fan of the alternatives in the backline. If I were to make any defender moves, I'd probably look to get another Arsenal defender in, and Gabriel would be my top target. The other one would be Senesi to cover the Bournemouth defence for Game Week 27 against Burnley away, but more importantly that double with 2 home fixtures against Sheffield United and Luton Town. My second defender is Nathan Ake, who isn't guaranteed to start against Manchester United, but I believe he will, and if he doesn't, I am in trouble because Estupinian isn't really a starter anymore. Lascelles doesn't get any minutes whatsoever in the Premier League, so my defence is down to the bare bones, and that's why a transfer could be needed in this position, and Gabriel and Senesi would be 2 of the top targets in this position. My final defender is Saliba, who's by far the best pick I have because he starts every single game. The fixture this week looks incredible, and even though Brentford at home could be tricky in Game Week 28 from a defensive perspective, and a blank in 29 is very likely, you never know. Chelsea could maybe bug out and lose to Leeds United, and that could give Arsenal that fixture to help us navigate blank Game Week 29 even easier. Then in Game Week 30 it's Man City away, and I wouldn't want to start any Arsenal player with the exception of Saka, but ultimately Arsenal defenders are holds for the season. My most likely transfer in could be Heung-min Son, and who do I sell? That is the big question. It's down to Palmer, Hwang Hee-chan and Anthony Gordon, and a lot depends on who will feature in blank Game Week 29. So if Chelsea do lose against Leeds United, which is unlikely but still possible, then I would actually be very happy to keep Palmer. I like him as an option for Game Week 27 and Game Week 28, and his fixtures from Game Week 30 to 32 are very encouraging as well. He's averaging 5.6 FPL points per game, and he's also right up there since Game Week 7 when he became a starter for Chelsea. No one really matches him in the midfield, especially at that price. But Heung-min Son for me is a fantastic option. I bought him not so long ago, just before the Asian Cup, and he returned in all 3 games for me. He was actually quite a consistent option while whilst he was in my team in both tenures this season. So this could be third time lucky, and Heung-min Son could be one of the very best options in the midfield from Game Week 27 up until Game Week 30. My second midfielder is Cole Palmer. The current plan is to keep him away to Brentford, so it comes down to Hwang Hee-chan or Gordon to sell to buy Heung-min Son. You might argue, well, Phil Foden has poor fixtures over the next 5. He blanks in Game Week 29 as well, but don't sell Phil Foden, even Kevin De Bruyne arguably, out of Manchester United. I cover this in the Trans Tips video. For any Man City asset, I think it's worth holding on to them for that Manchester derby. Then you could look to sell when they face Liverpool in Game Week 28. But I really like Cole Palmer. Brentford are also very poor defensively, more so in home matches rather than away from home. The big issue though is Chelsea. They could still be very inconsistent, and Palmer might have a very good game, but he's surrounded by poor players, especially in the attacking areas. My third midfielder is Phil Foden at home to Manchester United. I think he's a great captaincy option, and the same goes for Heung-min Son, to be fair. But Foden scored a hat-trick against Man United last season at the Etihad, and he's in the form of his life, so I think he's a great option. He got that rest in the FA Cup, which only adds even further to his appeal. And the final midfielder is Saka, away to Sheffield United. Let me know if you prefer him over Erling Haaland for the captaincy. It's a very close call for me this week, and Saka has just been the best player in the Premier League in this calendar year. Of course, that will change, and we're going to get new players who rise to form, and things will change very quickly, and Heung-min Son could be one to usurp Saka over the next 4 game weeks. I'm quite content with my front three, and Ollie Watkins kind of sums it up. He's a season keeper. He's facing Luton Town away this week. He's got a chance of doing really well, and you saw how they defended against Man City, and if they do that against Aston Villa, Watkins could be the one scoring a hat-trick over the weekend. But irrespective of home or away, I think Watkins doesn't really fall under that category. He delivers on both occasions. But in terms of Aston Villa, I think they're much better at Villa Park compared to on their travels, and that is kind of summed up by Douglas Luiz. But Watkins can do well either way. However, in terms of captaincy options, I probably wouldn't rank him as high as others would. I think Heung-min Son could arguably be even higher, even Phil Foden. But that's not to say Watkins is a bad choice. He's still probably in my top 5 or top 6 captaincy options for Game Week 27. That might change as we get to the deadline stream, but it's just something to consider, and I'm very happy to keep him regardless. The same goes for the next striker, Erling Haaland. Do not sell Haaland, De Bruyne, Phil Foden heading into Man United unless you get news of one of them being benched, with De Bruyne being the most likely in that scenario. But Erling Haaland and Foden are season keeps, arguably. Now, you could make some switcheroos, sell Haaland in Game Week 28 or sell Phil Foden, then buy him back for Game Week 30 or 31. But if you were to keep any Man City assets, Foden and Haaland are the ones. And for this week specifically, if De Bruyne starts, I would definitely keep him for this fixture in the Manchester derby, where I expect Man City to score 3 or 4 goals at the very least. The last forward is Ivan Toney at home to Chelsea. He doesn't have a good record against the Blues, actually. Only 1 assist throughout his career. No goals whatsoever, but this is a different scenario. Chelsea are in the mud pretty much, and whilst they have some good underlying numbers, both defensively and offensively, I do think they're there for the taking. And Brentford, they might not get the win or the draw, but it should be an exciting game with plenty of goals on both sides. In terms of my bench, it's currently Dubravka, Hwang, Estupinian and Lascelles, and to be honest, Hwang could do very well in this fixture, and with this provisional transfer of Heung-min Son in for Gordon, that could also backfire, because Gordon at home to Wolves, he's got a chance of hauling as well. He's on penalties currently, although Isak will probably take them off him if he does get the start and he can stay fit. But this is how my starting 11 looks like right now. I've got an injured out in Pedro Porro, Ake isn't guaranteed to start, and I've got a few issues here and there, but overall, it's a decent setup. It's not that optimal for double Game Week 28, and especially not for blank Game Week 29, where even though I don't want to do it, at the moment, based on the FA Cup results, it looks like I need to free hit in blank Game Week 29, and my original plan was to use the chip in either double Game Week 34 or 37, and unless we get some upsets on the Wednesday matches, it looks like a free in 29 is probably the best case scenario for my squad. In terms of the captaincy, it's a very close call, but I'm currently going to go for Erling Haaland at home to Manchester United. Saka is running him very close though, facing the worst team in the league, but actually, I've talked about this in recent streams as well, Sheffield United have conceded the most shots of any team. No surprises, right? But the second team is Manchester United, which is absolutely ridiculous. They've conceded 16 plus shots, more than any other team in the Premier League this season. So it's been absolutely incredible. And Man United have been able to grind out results, especially with their optimal front three of Højlund, Garnacho and Rashford, but with Rasmus missing out, that is a massive blow, not to mention Lisandro and Luke Shaw at the back. So I think they're there for the taking, and Man City, after scoring 6 past Luton Town in the FA Cup, they could smell blood and really get the job done. But let me know, of course, all your thoughts about my transfer plans, the captaincy. Who would you sell between Gordon, Palmer and Hwang Hee-chan to buy Heung-min Son? But really, just to reiterate, in the backline, I'm looking to buy Gabriel and or Senesi in the coming weeks. In the midfield, Heung-min Son is my primary midfielder transfer. I'm also looking at some alternatives like Bailey, Douglas Luiz, Jared Bowen, if I'm looking to navigate Blank Gameweek 29 without the use of the free hit. And up front, Solanke is a very easy transfer in once he's fully fit and available. There is a link to Drafthound in the description below. I'd highly recommend you check it out, and many of you have signed up using my link, so I do appreciate it, and I also hope that it's given you a lot of value because there are so many resources at your disposal. And for example, if you look at the optimization tool, they are recommending a few changes. So Dubravka and Palmer in for Areola and Hwang Hee-chan, and they're recommending Saka as the captain, and they did it last week actually. They had Haaland as the captain, but over the days they were updating the algorithms and Saka became their main recommended captain with the highest expected points in Gameweek 26, and Saka doubled the amount of points of Erling Haaland. So sometimes Drafthound is certainly worth listening to, that's for sure. And they're also recommending some transfers like Pedro Porro to an Arsenal defender like White or Gabriel, and Areola to Kelleher. I'm not really so keen on Kelleher for the reasons I described in the trans tips video, but I do like that Arsenal suggestion, and if I were to buy another defender, I think Gabriel is very likely to come in. The expected points is also 66.4, not so bad of course, and this is without even taking into account the transfer of Heung-min Son. And there is a new feature called player scouting, which I've talked about very briefly. Richarlison is actually slightly more favoured than Heung-min Son, but I still think Son in the long term will usurp Richarlison, and he's the best Spurs midfielder by some distance. If we actually click on Son, you can do it for any single player. Of course, there is a list of pros and cons in the summary section, but it goes far more beyond than that. There is also the performance. You've got so many different metrics that are analysed, the upcoming game weeks and their opponents, the chance of scoring, assisting, keeping a clean sheet, of their team winning the game. There's also value and how that's changed over the course of the season. There is so much that's really broken down. The role as well, and sometimes that's impacted by a player going off to the Asian Cup or African Cup of Nations, being injured of course. But that's regularly updated and factored in for the predicted lineups, which is another tool that Drafthound provides. There's also much more: the attack, the defense, and there's also similar players. And of course, Heung-min Son is compared to Saka, Foden, Odegaard. It makes complete sense. Richarlison, Diaz, and Havertz, and everything is broken down in the player scouting. So be sure to check out Drafthound and sign up as a pro paid tier member to gain access to all of these features, which are tremendous to say the least. My favorite still is the player rankings, and they currently have Saka as the best option over the next 3 game weeks, but that will change of course if Chelsea beat Leeds United and Arsenal versus Chelsea blank in Gameweek 29. So we'll find out on Wednesday night, of course. Be sure to check out Drafthound. The link is in the description below. Let's now head over to fpl.team and briefly discuss some possible transfers for double Gameweek 28. This would be very aggressive to say the least, but I'm going for Areola in goal, and I could make 2 defender transfers, and I'd have Saliba, Senesi with a double, Doughty another one with a double, and I'd have Saka, Hwang Hee-chan, Son and Palmer as the midfield 4, Tony, Solanke and Watkins up front. And if I'm kind of set on not free hitting in Gameweek 29, then keeping Tony makes complete sense, and I'd sell Erling Haaland when Man City face Liverpool away. But if I do free in 29, I'd probably just sell Ivan Toney and keep Erling Haaland, because he is someone you'd want to have for Gameweek 30 and beyond. But a wildcard in Gameweek 30 or 31 is possible in my case, and a lot of that will be determined by what happens in the FA Cup 5th round on the Wednesday. Once all of the games have completed and we have a clear picture of Blank Gameweek 29, I will have a very firm idea of what I want to do with my chip strategy, when to use the bench boost, the free hit and the wildcard, and that's where an upcoming chip strategy guide could come into play if you want to see it on the channel. The bench would be Dubravka, Foden, Estupinian and Pedro Porro, and to be honest, benching someone of Foden's quality doesn't sit right with me, even though it is Liverpool away. I know Foden had that goal disallowed last season, it was quite contentious, but in general Foden can be a thorn in Liverpool's side, just like he can be for any team in the Premier League. But there you go, a -8 is definitely not set in stone for double Gameweek 28. I might just stick with a -4. I'm quite flexible and prepared to take hits, but I have been taking quite a lot recently and they haven't paid off whatsoever. But that's pretty much it for the Gameweek 27 team selection. There could be an updated version if a lot changes, and that will probably be released on the Friday. And on Thursday, there can be a chip strategy guide if you want to see it on the channel. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, the FPL League, and Drafthound, which I showed you with the player scouting and all the tools that they offer. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 27 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.